Donc voilà, nous allons passer à la session de l'après-midi. Et le docteur Giovanni Chellini, c'est ça? Chellini, il insiste, ok. Le docteur Giovanni Chellini va être le modérateur de cet après-midi et l'enjeu pour lui va être de nous garder éveillés, tout simplement parce que c'est un combat contre la nature. Et on verra qui a gagné, nous, docteur Giovanni ou la nature. Donc voilà, avec ceci, docteur Giovanni, the floor is yours. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I would like to start by inviting the speakers to come join me on the stage, please. And I believe we are missing one. Oh no, okay, everyone's here. So thanks for joining this this early afternoon session, the third roundtable on the ENJEUX climatique, so on climate challenges. So as you know, I'm sure I don't need to convince you that climate change is putting a lot of pressure on systems that are very critical. For example, water systems, agriculture, and infrastructure. And this is especially this applies especially to the African continent and to African countries. And research, education, and innovation play a big role, a central role in addressing and tackling these challenges, especially, for example, for identifying sustainable agricultural practices or developing new methods and technologies for addressing climate resilience. Additionally, research needs to engage with the local communities, with policymakers, with industry, and on top of this, capacity needs to be built among research institutions on an international level, both in the African continent and outside of it. So the challenges that, that need to be discussed by the panelists are quite numerous and very varied. So we're going to structure the discussion around three main themes. So in the first part, we're going to discuss the gaps that currently limit and hinder the capacity of African countries to tackle climate change and that hinder their resilience to climate change, especially when it applies to education and research. In the second part, we're going to discuss how African universities and research institutions can tackle these gaps, how can they fill the gaps, and in the last part we're going to discuss what the role of internationalization and the role that internationalization plays in this context. I'm happy to welcome our speakers for today. So I would start with Dr. Mubarak Mahmud, so here on your right. So Dr. Mubarak Mahmud is a chercheur de recherche at the INRAE, so the Institut National de Recherche pour l'Agriculture, l'Alimentation and l'Environnement, and he's also a lecturer at the Aliko Dangote University of Science and Technology in Kano, Nigeria. He has a doctorate in agroforestry from Université Paris-Saclay, so he's a perfect example of internationalization of research. And he developed an innovative tool which is extremely low cost and participative, which can be used for doing inventory and surveillance of forestry. His research focuses on agriculture and forestry, as I mentioned, and their adaptation to climate change. So I would start by asking him the central question of the first theme, which is what are the key challenges within agricultural systems, water management systems, infrastructures, among others, that limit climate resilience in African countries, and how are these gaps worsened by gaps in higher education and research capacity? Please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and a typical example of internationalization of higher education. So the challenges of agriculture pertaining to climate adaptation, what I can say is that it's multifaceted and it's kind of myriad. There are many challenges that agriculture faces in Africa, and to mention a few of them, we have the central part of the problem is the gap that we have between higher education and policy. So that is to say that in most instances that you see, there is low level of collaboration between research institutions or research outcomes and governments. So that is why you will see that most of the policies that emanated from the government side is actually not evidence-based. And this is to say that the policies come out to be based on outdated or foreign data. And why did I say outdated is because in most of the institutions that we have in Africa, the curriculum are outdated. You will still find some institutions that are running based on colonial era curriculum. So this is one key challenge that we have in Africa. So you will find out that there are graduates that enter into the workforce without full knowledge of how to tackle or how to adapt to the multifaceted and multi-level challenges that we have in terms of agricultural resilience, environmental resilience, adaptation, and climate change. So this is one problem that we need to address in terms of agricultural challenge. And we have another major problem, which is fragmentation of agricultural systems. So as we know, more than 70% of agricultural output in Africa is maintained by peasant farmers. And these peasant farmers do not have, majority of them do not have access to current information regarding to climate smart agriculture, climate resilience, and how to maximize input with minimum impact on the environment. And the issue is we don't have in Africa a kind of comprehensive database where these farmers could be reached and engaged and informed to be resilient in their agriculture and to get access to digital tools and technology. And another key issue is weak research infrastructure that Africa is facing today. So by research infrastructure, we mean the physical aspect of doing research. So the research institutions, the universities, the laboratories, the libraries, the stable electricity, and even the stable internet connectivity. You will find in most institutions, in most of the countries, there are so many countries that are still struggling to provide stable electricity. And we know that this is key for resilience and providing agricultural and educational support. So this is to say that the governments are not really investing so much in terms of research development in African institutions. Because I remember in 2022, the largest African economy spent 0.3% of its GDP on education, making it the lowest in the whole African continent. So I think in order to solve out this problem, we need to really reinvest in education. And there is another main issue, is brain drain. So you will see that in Africa today, every year it says that more than 70,000 talented pros left Africa for developed countries. So actually this is doing significant negative impact on agricultural and environmental resilience in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much for the many points that you brought up. I would like to pick up especially on the point of updating educational curricula. And for that, I would give the parole to Professor Yusuf Daraja on your left. at the very left of the stage. Professor Yusuf B is the Vice Chancellor of Capital City University in Kano, Nigeria. And he's a professor in agronomy, mainly interested on crop science and the impact of climate change on food systems. In his role of Vice Chancellor of the University of Kano, he updated and brought forward multiple innovative education curricula that focused both on the effect of climate change but also on the digital transition. Please, Adi.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much. Just like by the way, Mubarak is my student, used to be my student in his undergraduate days. So I'm very happy to see him here doing well. It's true what he said about curriculum. The curricula, not only in every aspect of higher education in Nigeria or in Africa, is obsolete. That is why the students that we produce are not able to solve the issues that are arising in our society. And these issues are so many. And these issues are being compounded by climate change issues, especially for countries that are situated close to the Sahara, the countries in the Sahel and Sudan Savannah regions. What is happening now is that due to climate change, we have changes in the pattern of rainfall. When you will look at the data for about 100 years in the Sudan Savannah region, the rainfall normally comes end of May, mostly from 27th of May to the first week of June. But as I told you now, I left Nigeria 2 days ago. I can tell you the rains have not come everywhere. And some of the issues we have is not the late onset of the rains, it's the drought that occurs during crop growth, during critical periods of physiological growth of crops. Suddenly during anthesis, for example, you will see the rain will just stop, just like that, and then it will resume after. By then, the damage has been done. And so, we keep teaching our students and then doing the research. For example, I led the research on looking at the effect of abiotic stresses of drought and heat acting together to affect maize. Most of the research we do in Africa, we just look at the drought issue. We don't look at them that they occur at the same time simultaneously. And so what we found was very, very interesting. And so what we are saying is that the curriculum, what we teach our students needs to change. We need to input the issues of climate change, let them understand what is the, in fact, people in Africa don't understand the climate change. They don't understand what is staring them in the face. People are facing starvation, millions and millions of people, simply because we have been doing the same thing that our forefathers have been doing, and it cannot work. So, up to now, the yield of our crops is very low, extremely low. We've not reached our full potentials. Let me give you an example. When other parts of the world are getting 8 tons, 12 tons, 16 tons per hectare of maize, in our place, in most places in Africa, they are getting 2-3 tons. And they are happy. When they can easily get 7, 8, 9 tons, 10 tons per hectare. In all the crops, in all the animals that we produce, most of the cows that we rear in Africa, they produce less than 4 liters of milk per day. When they can produce 50 liters, 40 liters in some places. In Israel, in Saudi Arabia, they produce 60, 70 liters. I've been to a farm in Israel, they produce 70 liters. In Saudi Arabia, despite the heat, they produce 40 liters in their Almarai farm. We can still do that in Africa. We can feed ourselves, but we need to change the curriculum. We need to change the context in which we do research. And so when we come to talk about the internationalization of research, we will talk more about collaboration between African universities and research institutes. And by the way, we have very, very brilliant young people like Mubarak. What they need is that they need the opportunity to achieve their full potentials. We don't have that in most of Africa. And that is why when he was talking about the people running away, the bright minds in Africa are running away from Africa. And they are the ones that are supposed to bring development. And they are running away, and they must run away because the opportunities are not there to achieve their full potentials. And so when we come to talk about the internationalization of research and all that, we will talk more about how we can help the African researchers achieve their full potentials. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think thank you for bringing up all these points. I will touch on many of them later throughout the discussion. I would like to pick a specific thread that you started, and that is the one on water resources. And so on the topic of water resources, I would like to pass the mic right next to you to Dr. Guillaume Favreau. So Dr. Guillaume Favreau is an hydrogeologist, chargé de recherche et habilité à la direction de recherche à l'IRD, l'Institut de recherche pour le développement. And his work focuses on water resources, especially on subterranean waters and their usage, including in agriculture. So he has been, in the past, for 5 years, from 2018 until 2023, representative of the IRD at Niamey in Niger. He is currently the scientific referent for the IRD on a number of different research programs that focus on water resources. So I would give the floor to you, asking the same question, so to comment on current gaps that hinder African countries from tackling climate challenges, especially when it comes to water resources and the associated research infrastructure.
Merci, Monsieur Giovanni. Merci, chers collègues panélistes. C'est très facile pour moi de repartir et de développer, parce que je vais pouvoir m'appuyer sur ce qu'a pu indiquer le vice-chancellor de l'Université de Cadeau à ma droite. En réalité, les défis qui existent au sujet des ressources en eau et le changement climatique sont à la fois globaux, c'est-à-dire qu'ils sont partagés à l'échelle de l'ensemble de la planète, mais ils sont également pour l'Afrique subsaharienne et les pays africains de manière générale spécifiques. Et donc ils nécessitent des connaissances locales. Or, trop souvent, actuellement, quand des projets d'aménagement et de développement des ressources en eau sont mis en œuvre, et il y a un déficit de sollicitation des experts nationaux qui existent, qui sont sur place, qui ont des charges de travail et d'enseignement qui sont très importantes, beaucoup plus importantes qu'ailleurs, du fait de la très forte pression académique des étudiants qui viennent dans les universités, qui sont à la fois une ressource, mais qui sont aussi un frein au développement de recherche scientifique à forte visibilité internationale. Et donc, pour ce qui concerne les ressources en eau, les connaissances locales sont insuffisamment mobilisées, et trop souvent, on voit des experts internationaux venir chercher des solutions immédiates, parce que, par exemple, on parle des ressources en eau, mais je voudrais commencer par celles qui ont un impact économique très fort, ce sont les inondations. Les inondations, du fait du réchauffement climatique, touchent l'ensemble de la planète, donc la charge d'humidité dans l'atmosphère est beaucoup plus importante sous un climat plus chaud que sous un climat avec 2 degrés en moins, et donc créer des inondations qui n'existaient pas par le passé. Et donc on voit des schémas directeurs d'assainissement de l'eau qui sont dépassés, des ponts qui étaient en capacité de laisser passer l'eau qui ne le sont plus et qui tombent. Et donc quand les réaménageurs reviennent pour remettre en place sous la pression politique légitime, en fait, ils reconstruisent à l'identique sans prendre en compte de nouvelles normes hydrologiques qui seraient nécessaires de mettre en œuvre avec les connaissances pratiques plus fortes. Donc ça peut être le changement climatique, ça peut être aussi l'usage des terres qui a changé, des usages et de l'érosion qui sont connus localement, mais qui ne sont pas suffisamment connus des experts internationaux qui viennent. Donc où est le défi pour les où se situe le défi pour les universités? Il se situe également donc dans le lien et dans la création de richesses au niveau des expertises, des bureaux d'études qui sont en capacité de venir répondre aux appels d'offres et de guider au mieux finement les politiques de reconstruction et de développement des infrastructures qui soient résilientes face au changement climatique. Et donc l'IRD notamment, avec d'autres institutions, prône le développement durable, c'est-à-dire un développement qui soit soucieux de développement social et qui soit dans l'interdisciplinarité, qui prenne en compte beaucoup de l'ensemble des disciplines scientifiques pour répondre en prospective à ce que l'on sait va arriver, notamment les inondations. Sur les aspects ressources en eau, en fait, il y a aussi un grand potentiel de développement des eaux souterraines. Quand on regarde, en fait, pour ce qui concerne l'irrigation, je rejoins complètement les conclusions de mon honorable panéliste de droite, qui souligne que la production vivrière pourrait être beaucoup plus forte, notamment avec des intrants fertilisants. Et là aussi, les mobilités, puisqu'on est dans un cadre où on privilégie les mobilités, permettrait justement d'aller comprendre comment augmenter la productivité agricole, non seulement par des intrants agricoles, mais aussi en mobilisant les ressources en eau souterraines dans les parties du continent où elles sont encore en très fort potentiel. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Favreau, pour avoir abordé tous ces sujets. I would then move on to Professor Catherine Kunyanga. Professor Kunyanga is the Vice Chair of the Faculty of Agriculture at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. And at the same university, she also coordinates the Center for Food Security. Her work mainly focuses on sustainable food systems, food security, food technologies, and nutrition. So I would pose the same question to you, so please give us your input on what you think are the current gaps and in research, education, and potentially also in the involvement of women and in youth engagement.
Okay, so I'll start. I know a lot of the gaps have been mentioned, but I just want to mention that in Africa, agriculture really is the backbone, especially when you connect with food. And if Africa is to achieve food security, then we need to move to more sustainable agricultural practices, which is not happening realistically. And I think the first speaker and the second speaker have already highlighted the situation in Africa. But now I would say things are changing when it comes to curriculum change. I know, like our faculty and most of the universities have been trying to tailor or revise their curriculum to incorporate new agricultural practices and thinking. And I know things like agroecology and other practices that are sustainable to our soil health and also for productivity are already in this curriculum. For me, what I would more emphasize, and just to make sure that young people do not run away from Africa or their countries, is that really matching the curriculum, whatever we teach and the skills development should match with the industry. And so our university also has been trying to match the industry needs with skills and competencies that we build into our graduates. You can imagine 5 years ago, some of the agricultural universities had very low enrollment of students, but right now it's peaking because of these changes we are seeing in curriculum and the fact that we are able to include like digital transformation, AI, machine learning, robotics. But unfortunately, this is not being picked by our farmer, who is, Dr. Mubarak described very well that actually have no capacity. First of all, they cannot afford some of the technologies, and then also the land size is very small, sometimes 2 to 5 acres, so mechanized agriculture becomes very impossible and therefore productivity becomes very hard. And so we need governments in Africa to invest in agriculture. If you look at the AU strategies around agriculture and especially CADIP, the investment agreed upon by most of the countries should be 10%. But if you look at most of the countries, what is given as investment in agriculture is quite low. If you look at research also in agriculture, the investment given to this is very low. Most of the time we have to rely on international collaborations, and as the second speaker said, we'll talk about this later so that you can see that some of the initiatives are being funded through international collaborations and funding opportunities. But within the countries, then we need to up our game to fill that gap where the research capacities are still low. But I would also want to say, what has attracted the youth to agriculture and food security, because I work a lot with the youth and the women, is the fact that we have innovations. They are there. As much as we do not have investors who can invest in these technologies, innovations are there. If you look at Kenya, for example, in 2024, we had the highest number of startups by the youth, the young people, who are developing a lot of digital transformations in agriculture, ICT stuff. I was just talking to the ambassador here of Nigeria, and also South Africa here in France, and I was telling him, Africa is the hotbed of talents. We have young, bright minds, who are, some are already running, but some choose to stay to develop their countries, and they're really doing amazing jobs with the innovations to make up startups. And now, as universities, we are trying to link, which is a gap. The link between academia and the industry is very weak. We need the industry to pick some of these young people with innovations and invest in them if we are to improve agriculture towards food security. And we can spend a whole day here naming so many innovations that we are seeing coming up but are not being picked because of these weak links, and including our policies. They are not favorable. And even how the implementation happens, the regulatory agencies that are supposed to implement this also, that enforcement is very weak. So we still have a number of areas, as the previous speakers have said, that we need. And I see, for me, youth and women who are, we say women because 70% of agriculture and food sector is dominated by women. And actually, why youth? Because if you look at the statistics, for example, in Kenya, the people doing farming in the rural communities are actually 61 to 69 years across the continent. These are old people. So we need to have the youth engage in agriculture so that we can bring these innovations we are saying that can transform agriculture for sustainable agriculture and food system. So the only way we can do this is by addressing these gaps. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I pass the microphone to Professor Frans Swanepoel. He is a senior research fellow at the Center for Advancement of Scholarship at the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and he is also a chair in Future Africa in the topic of sustainable food systems. He's also senior Fulbright fellow at Cornell University in the United States, and his work mainly focuses on the transformation of agriculture and food systems and their sustainability in African countries. So please, the question is the same.
Thank you very much, moderator. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Most of what I wanted to say has been said already. You know, it's a very broad field if you speak about land systems, water systems, agricultural systems, food systems. The bottom line, I think, is very clear that we need to revitalize and transform agricultural research systems which culminate in food systems and food security, and is based on land and water systems across the continent. In the context of climate change or the climate crisis, I think it's important to just keep in the back of our minds that throughout the continent we experience a lot of droughts, we experience floods, unpredictable rainfall patterns, which the gentleman there highlighted, and this severely affect not only crop yields and food security, but also from the animal perspective or the livestock perspective, because most of the smallholder farming systems in Africa is integrated systems. It's both crop and livestock. That, of course, because of the climate crisis and the impact of all of that culminating low productivity, to a large extent only built on rain-fed agricultural systems, limited mechanization, low input and access to many of the inputs for efficient production, including fertilizer, for example, improved seed varieties and many others. Of course, degraded soils and ecosystems that are not managed properly, and weak extension services. That's not only across the continent, it's also in South Africa to a very large extent. We spoke of the importance of relevant curricula. We spoke of the importance of training people for the world of work. If we think of agricultural systems or food systems, it's really integrated systems. And before anybody can be trained effectively to function effectively, they need to have a very clear understanding of systems thinking, systems methodology, understand the importance of multi-inter and transdisciplinarity, because often we train our students with disciplines first and problems second. It should be the other way around. It should be problems first and discipline second. Many of these problems or challenges across the continent are wicked problems. To transform food systems on the continent, we need to make sure that doctoral students or postdoctoral fellows have a very good understanding and appreciation of a number of skills areas which include systems thinking, whether they come from a soil science background or agronomy or crop science background. They need to understand systems thinking, systems methodology. They need to understand the soft skills that is necessary to engage and co-create knowledge with the potential beneficiaries, the smallholder farmers. That's certainly required to engage with policymakers, so we need to train them in policy making. We need to develop the research project with all the food system stakeholders involved and eventually engage in policy dialogues so that the technology that are being developed will be taken up by the smallholder farmers. And obviously in that context, the extension service is critically important in many countries on the African continent, in South Africa to a very large extent, in many of the provinces. The extension service required to be retrained. They have not been trained to provide the service which is required. In many of the other countries or other areas, they don't have access because of government support to be able to engage in the running of an efficient extension service. So that reality is unfortunately what we face on the continent. Having said that, and the fact that we refer to examples, the youth dividend which we have, the gender mainstreaming which is critically important, I always say that 80% of the food that we eat on the African continent have passed through the hands of women. So we really need to empower women in any food systems or agricultural transformation perspective and make use of the youth dividend, because 70% of the youth or the people on the African continent is under 30 years of age. And we need to provide incentives and motivate them to become interested in the quest of transforming agriculture and food systems on the continent. A final thing that I just want to say is, I think to a very large extent, if we come to the infrastructural and the policy and governance components, there was reference to the science policy divide, to the fact that many of the policies that are being developed are not evidence-based. All of that is true, but critically important is that the infrastructural or the governance framework is also not enabling in many cases. We've all heard about the American land grant system, I think. Yep. And it's a land grant system where the university, teaching and learning, extension and research is all integrated in a system where there's a university, a research entity and extension service. And they've developed one of the most sophisticated agricultural systems in the world. In Brasilia, they have an adapted land grant system where there's a very close collaboration between the University of Sao Paulo, for example, agriculture, Embrapa, the agricultural research Council equivalent in South Africa, or any one of the other NARIs, the National Agricultural Research Institutions on the continent, and the universities. Similarly, if you think of India, the state university system in India has an adapted land grant model. If you go to Bangalore State Agricultural University, the Indian Agricultural Research Center has a research entity in Bangalore next to the university, next to the extension service. So they all integrated in a coherent fashion to make provision for articulation pathways, where students can start with a diploma, they can end up with a PhD. This is also applied in Edinburgh or Scotland. You can start off with an agricultural college diploma and eventually get a PhD from Edinburgh University. In many of the countries in the world which is really successful and have developed their agricultural systems to the extent where they net exporters of food. In India, with the state university system, they have lifted millions out of poverty through that specific approach. And this, unfortunately, is not the reality of the African continent.
Thank you. So already when addressing this first question, many relevant points came up. I noted down many of them, but here just a few as a reminder of what we just covered. So gaps in knowledge transfer from research and education into industry, the approach to droughts and floods and water resources, and the lack of knowledge that can be applied to develop local solutions, lack of applications of technology in agriculture, and the need to update educational programs. So this brings me on to the next theme, which would be what are the next steps that need to be done in order to address these issues. So we already covered the gaps and what is currently being done to fill the gaps. My next question would be, what do you envision the next steps to be in addressing these gaps? And so how can African universities and research institutions help build capacity to address these challenges? And how should they update their educational programs, implement knowledge transfer mechanisms both to farmers and industries and local communities, but also accompany policymakers, and feel free to chip in other topics that might come to your mind. So I would start with Professor Daraja.
Thank you very much. Actually, there are, I'll just talk about 4 issues that we need to change in order to have a different narrative, as it were, of the one. Prof talk about the issue of extension. In my part of Africa, the extension is dead, completely dead. And so the farmers are left to their own devices for the last 10, 15 years. We used to have a very robust extension system. In Nigeria, especially in northern Nigeria, we used to have every village has what we call a VEA, Village Extension Agent. Every village is attached to a village extension agent, and he's given all the wherewithal, all the things to work with. He has a motorcycle that he moves around amongst villages. He's trained every 2 weeks. He's trained at the end of every month. He's trained every 3 months. New innovations, new techniques are taught to him, and he goes and teaches the farmers, but this one is gone. I was telling someone because we did a program in Nigeria in which we went to the National Assembly to ask them to revive the extension, because without the extension, really, you cannot reach the farmers. They will always be in the dark. So now we formulate, this thing for them, the legislation, which is going through the process now in our National Assembly, of reviving the extension, and we said this could be because of the new things we want them to teach farmers, things to do with climate change, climate resilience, things to do with new innovations, digital agriculture, and so on. So now we are starting from the scratch. We teach them those things and they go and teach the farmers. And this applies across the whole of Africa. Some are doing well, most are down. And we need to change that. And to do that, like we say, we need to change the way the extension is done. And we also need to change, like we talk about the curricula. The curricula, we must integrate digital agriculture. We must integrate agricultural resilience within the curricula. Not only in agriculture. It should be across all the fields. Let people understand what we're going through. And then we also need to look at the collaboration, very, very important. Collaboration among institutes in the South-South. Because we have the same problems. But also collaboration with institutions in the West, for example, because they have the advancement in technology. They have the advanced laboratories they have, because what is happening in Africa is that most of our equipment are obsolete. In fact, no internet in most places, no electricity. We're just down. And so, but the capacity is there. And so when you have this collaboration between institutions and research institutions and universities within the South-South, and then within the Western, more advanced countries in the West and in other places, you would now have a very resilient agricultural system. And then we will be able to achieve our full potentials as a people. As I tell you now, the population in Africa is less than 30 years. More than 70% in my country are less than 30 years. And the trouble with that demography is that if these ones are not, taught about the romantic nature of agriculture, if I will use that word, they are running away from agriculture. And she can testify. A lot of faculties of agriculture are getting lower and lower, interest from students. Because when they look at agriculture, they look at backwardness. You are going at agriculture, you are going to, but I say let's change the narrative. Let's bring new innovations. Let's bring digital agriculture. Let's bring so many things, climate smart agriculture, so that people will see it. And like we were talking with you the other time, this is the age of the AI. This is the age of the Internet of Things. Let's integrate our agriculture with the Internet of Things. Let us make it look more appealing to the generality of the students and the farmers and so on. And so when we do that, there is also lack of synergy between government policy and then what happens in the education sector. No synergy at all. They need to come together we need to tell ourselves what we want as a people, what government policy will be, and what are expected from the universities and the research institutes. If we don't do that, we will be in trouble. And then there should be this collaboration also between the industry and the research institutes. Because there is no need, if you do a research, you cannot market it, in the world. And so we must have these four, things so that we can move our agriculture in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So since you picked up on many points that also Professor Kunyanga mentioned, so I would pass the ball back to her.
Yeah, I want to support a lot of what Professor said, the extension system and all that. So, but I want to throw it on the side of the university now. I think the way we train our students has to change. We are dealing with Generation Z. In Kenya, they call them Gen Z. And recently, they have been shown to be very resilient and with a lot of information and technology. And as you said, these people, you can't, as a professor, you don't just go to class and just teach anything or train on anything. No, you have to be ahead of them, because if you go to teach basic research or something like that, or just go to ChatGPT and other AI platform, even exams, we are dealing now with the exam cheating, because if you leave it open, they'll get all the answers from AI. So why don't we use that AI to let that creative thinking, energy, critical thinking, and innovation go to solving global challenges. So we really need to rethink how we train our youth, and we need to make it more experiential learning and more hands-on practical training so that they can help solve some of these global challenges. The other point I wanted to really mention is the networking and collaborative approach with the universities, the industry, and also global partners. And I want to thank that INRAE is represented here, IRD also here, where we are partnering and starting to do memorandum of understanding with the University of Nairobi, among other many partners like here in France, CNRS also is part of it. And many universities here had an opportunity to come for a benchmarking visit, I think a month ago, and we went through many universities, especially AgroParisTech, who are doing a lot of things in agriculture, and it's amazing the things as professors you can learn and take back to your country, things that through student mobility and staff mobility, exchange of knowledge, you can actually pick and tailor-make to your local solutions in the country. So these collaborations and partnership for me work, and also the fact that you can also have global experts maybe in your country, in your university. These global experts are able to come in with new system thinking, new approach to solution that you can actually use as local countries or local communities to address global challenges. The other thing I wanted to mention, and it's escaping my mind, we need to empower youth and women, seriously. And I'm glad, I think government partly is here, ambassadors, but I wish I would speak to my president directly, or our CS Agriculture, that's the cabinet secretary. A lot of things depend on the investment we do in agriculture, in food security. Without food, we are nothing. And I think Africa is the bedrock again of raw materials. We have all the resources, but what happens? We don't have, for example, technologies or techniques that can convert that raw material, that cassava from Nigeria, into starch, yet you are importing starch from other countries, or coffee and cocoa comes from Africa, but we have to take it somewhere else for value addition. Then when it comes to Africa, you'll buy it at 3 times the price. You look at my country right now, we are net importer at 80%. Things coming from outside, yet we are having raw materials produced from agriculture and food sector in the country. But a lot of it, of course, will go to waste because of post-harvest losses. If you mention post-harvest losses, Africa is dealing with a lot. We are losing over 50% sometimes of the things you produce. Why? He said it properly. Infrastructural development is also a big problem. I go sometimes to the field to train farmers. You pass a road where, when it's raining, no car can pass there, yet that county or that region is the highest milk producer. Do you know what they do when they have excess milk? They will pour it out. Where do they take it? I've seen farmers pouring milk out. I've seen mango farmers actually expressing juice from mango for their cows to drink, because they don't have, first of all, factories or cottage industries that can do value addition. The infrastructure is so bad that they cannot even transport that milk maybe to a dairy factory in Nairobi or something like that. So as a continent, I know we are dealing with that, but we have the solutions, we have the innovations, but we need to mobilize all that into a way that we can utilize this to build our youth, to empower our women who are the largest producers in terms of agriculture and livestock. And if we do this, I see with collaborations and partnership like the one we are having right now here in France, we can do a lot. And so for me, let's strengthen the network, the partnerships between countries, within ourselves in Africa, but also the North and South, and also let's empower our youth and women in agriculture if we are going to feed the future and feed the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. So staying on the topic of agriculture and food systems, I would pass the microphone to Professor Swanepoel. And yes, the question is still the same. So what are, in your opinion, the next steps to address all the challenges that we've discussed?
I spoke too long in the previous session, and I have a tendency to do it often. So I'm going to be short and to the point now. I will just give one example of what we have done at the University of Pretoria, specifically to address these issues of a systems perspective, systems understanding, making sure that the students have the necessary skills that are required once they have finished their PhD, or early career researchers busy with a postdoctoral qualification, to be able to come out better so that they can serve society immediately. So our goal was specifically to strengthen food systems research in the translation of evidence into interventions using systems analytical approaches, research design and approach, and implemented in partnership with all the food system stakeholders. So through that, we produced collaboratively context-relevant inter- and transdisciplinary research, and we did that through the creation of a 2-year fellowship program for early career researchers, postdoctoral fellows across 10 universities in the Africa. We received funding from the UKRI Global Challenges Research Fund. They were one of our partners. It's under auspices of the Arua Center of Excellence in Sustainable Food Systems that there was reference to, in collaboration with Pretoria, University of Nairobi, University of Ghana, and then we've selected a few others. So we developed the food systems framework, which of course is not the same everywhere. It's unique to be context relevant with the food producing environment, the production of the food, the waste that are taking place, and the consumers where they produce it. There's of course the system with all the drivers, and then the outcomes that we want from the food system, and that's climate smart agricultural practices, nutrition sensitive agricultural practices. We want to make a contribution to improved livelihoods, poverty, job creation, because we're in Africa with smallholder farmers, and we want to make sure that we take care of the environment, so ecosystems, biodiversity, and then obvious globally, because nutrition, agriculture links nutrition and health, to make sure that it's nutrition sensitive approaches that we also adopt. So all the early career fellows that we've selected through a rigorous process had to develop a proposal mentored by a global North and global South, or African mentor. They had to develop the proposal in a transdisciplinary fashion with all the food system stakeholders involved from the beginning. A number of capacity development interventions were implemented over the 2-3 year period in terms of understand how systems work, know how to write a good proposal, provide policy training, how do you engage with policy environment, how do you present your work to a non-scientific audience, how to write a scientific article, but not just out of your PhD, to write it that you can publish it in a high-impact journal, for example. This is the capacity development interventions that we've gone through. After 4 years, we have completed this process with 80 researchers involved, and we've published 51 articles in high-impact journals. We've produced 3 special editions, Sustainability, Food Frontiers, others, and we've produced 72 policy papers in consultation with the policy training, the policy engagements across the different areas where we have worked. And it's very clear that there's significant impact in terms of strengthening the universities where these early career researchers have been coming from. So all in all, we're very happy and very grateful. Last year, the specific Food Systems Research Network for Africa, beg your pardon, were nominated by Times Higher Education as Partnership of the Year in the final competition. And the FAO have adopted the FSNet Africa case study as a case study of how to bridge the science policy divide between the research and technology that we develop and how to apply it to make an impact where the policymakers take up the information. It's just that example, and one can read a lot about that if you go to Food Systems Research Network for Africa. But I think more and more this is the kind of approaches that, and we certainly cannot do it on our own. We need the global north. We want it to be Africa-based, Africa-owned, but globally enabled. We don't have adequate supervisory capacity to do it without the global north's assistance. To just give you one final example in this regard, in South Africa we produce 50 PhDs per million of the population annually, 50. The rest of the continent is lower. In any country where there's a vibrant science and technology system, like here in France, for example, they produce between 250 and 500 PhDs per million of the population, and that makes them competitive in the global knowledge economy. So we are so far behind, and we don't have adequate supervisors to train the number of PhDs that we need to train. So therefore we need to do it in collaboration with the global north in all the different areas or thematic areas which are critically important. And this is where the importance of participation, collaboration and partnerships becomes critical.
Thank you. So, I think then the obvious person to follow up on that would be Dr. Favreau, regarding the other side. Dr. Favreau, if you can comment on the topic of the role of doctoral education and in addressing these gaps that we identified. Yeah, and then if you want to add other points, feel free.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Je vais prendre votre sujet sous l'angle d'un exemple. En fait, j'ai eu l'opportunité de co-encadrer beaucoup de jeunes doctorantes et doctorants d'Afrique subsaharienne, d'Afrique du Nord aussi. Et un élément qui m'a frappé, parce qu'en fait, quand on travaille sur les changements climatiques et l'impact que ça peut avoir sur les paysages et les bassins versants hydrologiques, on a besoin de données de long terme. Donc les données de long terme, ça peut être des suivis hydrologiques, ça peut être des suivis du niveau des nappes, mais c'est aussi des suivis des paysages par remote sensing, la télédétection. Et en réalité, on a comparé à d'autres continents, au sous-continent, il y a relativement peu de données qui sont produites depuis le continent. Quand on veut suivre les évolutions du réseau hydrographique dans le temps, l'évolution du lac Tchad, l'évolution du bassin du fleuve Niger ou du delta intérieur du fleuve Niger, on dépend, enfin les étudiants dépendent en termes de jeux de données, d'images de photographie aérienne pour le milieu du XXe siècle ou de données de la télédétection satellite qui dépendent de satellites qui ont été lancés par d'autres pays, d'autres continents. Et donc on se retrouve sur la période récente avec des jeux de données qui sont dépendants d'agences spatiales extra-continentales, mais surtout avec des densités d'informations qui sont totalement insuffisantes pour préciser finement les changements en cours. Et donc, partant, de mieux comprendre les évolutions fines qui peuvent exister au niveau local, là où se situent les enjeux. Donc en fait, parmi les défis qui se posent, c'est en fait d'être quelque part obligé, entre guillemets, d'utiliser des données produites à l'extérieur du continent pour définir des évolutions qui sont utiles pour mieux guider les politiques publiques de développement et d'usage des terres notamment. Voilà, donc je ne vais pas être plus long, je vais juste souligner ce point et je vous rends la parole.
Merci. And so now Dr. Mahmud, so on the topic of the next steps for increasing capacity. Please, it would be good to have your view, especially if you want on the topic of knowledge transfer from research into local communities and the role of technologies and low-cost technologies.
Yeah, thank you. So I think before going into the knowledge transfer, I would like to emphasize on the issue of funding, because I think funding is very important, because we can't do anything without funding. Because in most of the institutions in Africa, or most of the countries in Africa, spend less than 0.5% of the GDP on education. There are so many countries that spend 0.3%, but we see some countries like France spend up to 6% of the GDP on higher education, on education in general. So I think the issue of funding is very important. You will see that due to acute shortage of funding, there are so many institutions in Africa that could not afford for institutional inscriptions to access global journals. So I would like to emphasize on this issue, like we need to pressure our governments to increase the funding of education to at least 1%, which is the threshold of the African Union, the minimum threshold for education. And regarding the partnership, I think the partnership is important, but in most cases, when there is global partnership between North and South, the African institutions are usually considered as the implementers rather than the co-creators. So I think the African institutions need to feel that they are part of the problem and at the same time part of the solution. And you will see that in most cases these partnerships do not last for a long time, like usually 1 to 3 years, max 5 years. And I think we need to spend more time for the partnership in order to build enough trust and infrastructure. And there is this important issue of knowledge transfer. There are so many innovations going on in Africa, as Dr. Katrin mentioned, in Kenya. But this innovation remains only in Kenya. There are so many institutions, so many countries like Nigeria that do not have access to those innovations. And likewise, innovations being developed in Nigeria, many Kenyans and South Africans do not have access to such innovations. So I think we need to create a kind of platform or framework where all innovations should be shared among African institutions. For example, recently I developed a tool which is important for measuring heights of trees and diameter of trees, and also estimating the sequestered carbon by trees. So I posted that in my social media on Facebook, and I have been contacted by people from at least 7 nationalities in Africa. So this is to show you that there is no link between the institutions, and the institution is in Africa, so the different institutions. So I think we need this, and we also need to revamp the extension services, because actually the extension services are dead, and there is no, even now most of the information that people obtained on social media, and most of the farmers, since they are peasants, do not have access to social media and digital tools. So there is a need to revamp the extension services, to develop new digital tools and access for local farmers to obtain such information. Thank you.
So I think many of the points that we discussed bring us naturally to the next theme, which is in the title of the forum, which is the internationalization. So we already covered it while covering the other points, but now I would really like to focus on what are the main challenges and opportunities in building partnerships between African universities and research institutions inside the African continent, but also between African institutions and European institutions, for example, or beyond Africa and Europe. So I would like to start with Dr. Favreau, who, if you can give us your input on this and especially if you can comment on, based on your experience with the interaction between the IRD and organizations in Niger. Maybe one point, it would be good if everyone could stay slightly shorter, maybe 3-4 minutes each, so that we have time for a question from the audience.
Merci Giovanni. Donc en fait, basé sur l'expérience de l'IRD, je dirais que le point clé pour créer des partenariats efficaces, c'est la durée. C'est de créer des cadres de partenariats qui s'inscrivent dans le long terme. Typiquement, à l'IRD, nous avons différents outils qui permettent de nouer ces partenariats qui sont adaptés à différents objectifs. Nous avons des jeunes équipes associées qui permettent à des jeunes équipes de recherche pilotées par des jeunes chercheurs d'universités des pays avec lesquels nous travaillons, avec lesquels nous avons des accords cadres, de s'inscrire sur une durée de 4 années pour travailler sur un sujet nouveau pour eux, qui leur permet de dégager des moyens pour élaborer les recherches qu'ils le souhaitent, et la jeune équipe est pilotée par une jeune ou un jeune chercheur. Nous avons aussi des International Research Network qui mettent en relation sur une thématique donnée, ça peut être l'accélérateur de la Grande Muraille Verte, ça peut être des sujets autour des forêts à Madagascar, etc., ou des questions liées à la production marine, en fait, de produits de la mer, qui sont des questions clés pour le développement du pays, sur des sujets qui sont co-construits ensemble et co-pilotés. Et là, c'est typiquement sur 6 années. Et enfin, nous avons les outils phares, que sont les laboratoires mixtes internationaux, qui sont 5 ans renouvelables une fois, donc jusqu'à 10 années, qui ont vocation à s'inscrire dans le temps long sur une thématique clé qui est co-construite, co-partagée, qui implique des mobilités du sud global vers le sud global ou vers le nord, avec des participations à congrès qui permettent vraiment d'inscrire une thématique dans une faculté, dans un département scientifique d'une université subsaharienne, pour l'occurrence d'Afrique du Nord ou d'Asie ou d'Amérique, si on regarde les choses de manière encore plus large, et qui permettent de produire de la science de très haute qualité. Typiquement, ce que l'on souhaite, c'est des productions qui arrivent jusqu'à Science ou Nature, qui permettent d'inscrire l'expertise de l'université en question au cœur de la planète scientifique à l'échelle globale. Donc voilà, c'est vraiment ces points-là. On a aussi un autre élément qui fait sens dans la question du changement climatique, c'est qu'on va vers des domaines qui ne sont totalement inconnus. Quand on dépasse les 2 degrés, on part en territoire inconnu. Et là, pour mieux mettre en perspective les nouveaux, alors je vais prendre mathématiques, les nouvelles ères hydroclimatiques dans lesquelles nous avançons, il est important d'avoir des données sur le long terme. Donc nous aussi, nous impliquons, lorsque cela est souhaité, dans des observatoires de l'environnement sur le temps long, pour essayer de mieux caractériser les trajectoires qui nous mènent vers ces nouvelles ères hydroclimatiques liées au changement climatique. Donc c'est vraiment important d'investir sur le temps long. C'est parfois des montants relativement modestes, mais qui permettent de tracer des chroniques, des évolutions sur le temps long, sur la période de connaissances scientifiques.
Merci. So now I would pass on the microphone to Professor Swanepoel. Again, on the topic of the role of internationalization and what the challenges and opportunities are.
Thank you. I think 3 important lessons which we have learned over the years is that any globalization or internationalization of higher education should focus on 3 main themes in our case. To enhance research partnerships to tackle global inequalities or global challenges, like food systems, for example. We want to make sure that we position the transformation of the food system to become part of the climate crisis. The second one is to embed international collaboration in the next generation of researchers. We have done that with FSNet Africa, for example. There's many other examples. I think I briefly mentioned to some people Charm EU. Many of you might or might not be aware of Charm EU, but it's funded by the EU. Universities in France can be a member and a leader of Charm EU with 5 or 6 other European universities, but then also work with a university in the Global South. They offer a master's program in sustainability science. We at the University of Pretoria had the privilege to host some of those students for their capstone project, is the word they call for it, where they need to spend 100 days in the field on a practical problem related to sustainability. They are being supervised in a robust, transdisciplinary way and write a report from different perspectives. In our case, we've hosted them at the University of Pretoria's Veterinary Science Research Institute that is inside the Kruger National Park, close to Bushbuck Ridge, an area just outside, and look at different things related to sustainability. It's the 4th or the 5th cohort that we're hosting now, and those students are really enjoying it and learning in a cohort fashion from different cultures, from the global north and the global south. And then finally, to strengthen the research systems in African universities through the internationalization effort. I think the strengthening of research systems to be able to analyze data, to look at trends, and to make recommendations were also emphasized by earlier speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would pass the microphone to Professor Daraja.
Thank you very much. I think we've discussed all these things since the beginning. But basically, I think someone talked about the number of PhDs we produce in Africa. As a proportion of population is very small. I think we can increase that number by collaboration between the universities in Africa and the research institutes and universities here by sending people to do their bench work. They are doing lab work and so on. They can come here, spend 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year to do bench work. It really helps in accelerating their progress. I think these are some of the collaborations that we have to do to produce more researchers that will solve the problems that are emanating. And then we say there must be also collaboration because we know each other, we know our problems with universities in Africa among themselves, with the research institutes. You know, you have University of Nairobi working with University of Ghana, working with University of Modération in Nigeria, working with Iowa University in Nigeria, working with universities in Cameroon, and so on to solve issues. I think it will make, and then when they do, because they know the issues better than other people, they can now collaborate with scientists and research institutes in the north, that is the more developed parts of the world, to enhance their research output. In this way, we will have a win-win situation for all. The collaboration between the institutes within the south, and then collaboration among the institutes and then the universities and research institutes in the north. And that will enhance the capacity and capability of the scientists, and then we can solve these issues emanated. This is a real issue. This climate change is affecting Africa. In fact, it's affecting Africa more than any other place in the world. You know, so many places are having drought. They are having, what do you call it, flooding, sudden flooding in many places. And that one, whether it is drought, whether it is heat, whether it is flooding, it reduces the food that goes to the people. And that is a big recipe for trouble. And that's why we're having trouble all over Africa. Most of the trouble we have has to do with those resources. Food, people must be secured in terms of food. If you are not secured, then there will be trouble. And even the countries in the north here. For you to avoid people coming across the Mediterranean, you need to go and help the people in Africa. Those are young people, less than 30 years when you look at them. They need to stay there, they need to work, but the opportunities are not there. We must produce the opportunities for them there. Both government policy in Africa and then policies within, for example, the EU. Help those places. Let's have a good policy framework that will help us to help our people. And then we help everyone. Thank you very much.
Then I would invite the audience to start thinking about questions, and then I would pass the microphone to Dr. Mahmud.
So I think all what I have in mind to say has already been said, but what I would like to emphasize is on the issue of partnership, because we need to really have this partnership between North and South, and most importantly to enhance the term of the partnerships, because I do believe that a partnership that takes a long time would be more powerful in terms of creating trust and reliable infrastructure, because most of the partnership that we have, as I mentioned before, last 1, 2, 3 years maximum like this. So we need to review these partnership terms and to enhance them so that we will see critical results out of it. That's all.
Thank you. And to conclude this last theme, Professor Kunyanga.
Yeah, most things have been said, but I want to emphasize on 3 issues. One is doing global research. If we are going to achieve internationalization, then we need to have a research that addresses global challenge to be multidimensional. That means then the issue they are bringing in about partnership has to be done. The other one is shared resources. I know most of the speakers say our labs are empty, we don't have equipment, but I know with the internationalization and partnerships, we can have shared resources where you can have even a staff or a student come to France, do some work in a lab here that is well equipped, vice versa. Students from France, for example, can come to Kenya, for example, or South Africa, go to the pharmacy, there are problems, because sometimes researchers sit in the offices and just imagine farmers are going through this problem. So to have global solutions for our global challenges, then we need to capitalize on sharing of such resources, and this means then partnerships, forming consortiums between universities, both in the north and south, but also between south and south. The other one I wanted to mention is interdisciplinarity. The previous years and even currently in some countries, you find that researchers tend to work on their own in silos, and also universities sort of work in silos. For us to achieve then internationalization, it means then having research that is more interdisciplinarity. And you can imagine things like climate change. That is not a global challenge that you can address by only one discipline. You need people from environment, from agriculture, from food, from social sciences. So all these coming together in a consortium with all the university, private sector. That's how we are going to address some of the global challenges. So I wanted to just emphasize on those 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we have time for 2 questions from the audience. I see one in the back. 2 in the back.
Thank you. My name is Mary, and I'm a pluridisciplinary artist and founder of the Neo Thinker, which is a media that focuses on political analysis and philosophy in order to understand the world. So my question is about, since I deal with a lot of migrants here in Paris, and a lot of young Africans that are going through so many hardships. And I have started a program called Art for Education. And since I'm an artist, so we do a lot of events and sell art in order to help educate young migrants. So my question is, what are the African universities doing about, you know, the migrants that are in Europe, and they're like 18 years old, they're like 19, 20. I'm actually working with a youngster who's like 19 years old, and he's so smart, and I'm helping him code since I'm in the tech field also. But anyway, so my question is, how can we create something together as Africans and with the universities, so that also the young children, I mean, they're still children, yeah, but the young Africans that are coming to Europe because they believe in this ideal, you know, and this Eldorado that they have been sold, and they will never find it actually, because they will have to work very, very hard to create something for themselves. So how can we help them? And what programs can be put in place together to do so?
Who wants to?
Vice Chancellor should start.
Oh, okay. I think we've said so many things about those young people. What we need to do, in essence, is to create an enabling environment for them not to follow these dangerous routes to come here. It's extremely dangerous. They go through the Sahara, they go through the Mediterranean, and more than half of them die along the way. So it's an existential threat. But we should ask ourselves, why are they taking those drastic routes to come to Europe? They are taking that route because they don't have belief that they have a future where they are coming from. We need to create a future for them. We need to create an enabling environment for them, and that can only be done by very responsible governments. Government policy is the only thing that can change that. Like I said, they are extremely, when you talk to them, very intelligent people. Just give them the opportunity, they will achieve their full potentials. But the opportunities are not there. The schools are down. The future is bleak to them. So the only thing they look to the north. Whatever happens, I will come to Europe. If you tell them there are no opportunities, they will not listen. If you tell them there are danger, they will not listen, because it's human, you know, it's survival. They won't survive as people, and they are young people. And so what we need to do, and that is where the European governments need to do very well, especially EU and the rest. They need to force our governments, as it were, that you must provide environment for these people to have a bright future. And what are these environments? Good schools, opportunities, and that's why we are talking, when you have the synergy between the university, research institutes, and industry. And then she was talking about the farmers, you know, herders, you know, sending milk away into the river. So you need to have that synergy together. If you don't have that, they will always come. Ma'am.
Yes, sure. Just quickly, 1 minute.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, opportunities are not there, but you can create opportunities. And I think you are a perfect example of creating an opportunity. The program that you are running at for education is already an innovative approach that you are using to bring in these young people, create opportunities for them. I wouldn't say we want to create a picture of the bleak future. I think there is a future, and personally, I work with the youth in agriculture, and before, you remember, like maybe your time or the last years back, you used to finish college and the government picks you. Like if you're doing agriculture, you become an extension officer automatically with a government salary and a vehicle. But as you said right now, even those people don't want to work as extension officers. But we need again to change the thinking of how we are training our graduates. As I said, innovations is the way to go. Look at China that is taking over the world. Children, by the time they are 5, 10 years old, they are taught about how to innovate, create opportunities. I think the power of innovation in Africa has not really been tapped. Yeah, science and technology is there, but how do you mobilize that knowledge to solutions that work for the youth? When I teach my graduates, I tell them, I'm not training you to be a job seeker, but a job creator. When you go out there, don't expect a white-collar job from the government, but be the person to create that job opportunity. And it's good that you've asked that question, because you are a perfect example how youth can create opportunities for others. You have a good innovation, do a startup. Kenya, I said, was leading with startups. These startups are by the youth. And universities can help with this by having incubation center and acceleration programs where they can pick some of these young, bright minds, as you are calling them, Prof, and actually accelerate and maturate these ideas. They can create startups and employ other youth. We need to work together, all sectors, because sometimes I know we place a lot of blame on the government, but also the government cannot provide all the solutions. So the solutions lie within us, our youth, and I think it's doable. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm afraid we don't have any more time for more questions, but I invite who has more questions to approach the speakers directly during the pause. So now I would give a big thank you to the speakers for joining us.